الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. We continue inshallah ta'ala with the book of Fadl Siyam, the virtue of Siyam of Ramadan, and some of the ahkam that is important and it might be hidden from some people by Sheikh Ibn Baaz rahimahullah. And we stopped after when he mentioned about the importance of the salah, that what a Muslim should أن ينتهز هذه الفرصة to take advantage of that opportunity, and that is when a person witnessed the month of Ramadan. This is such an important opportunity, and a person never know how many Ramadan that he will be able to witness. So part of the ta'zeem of the awamir, of the commands of Allah, and anything that is important in one's life, a person would prepare for it, would do something before it comes. So that's why the month of Sha'ban, this is the month when a person prepare himself for the month of Ramadan. And of course, to give attention to the salawat, the 5 daily salah, which is the best and the most important matter of obligation after the shahadatain. And the haqq of it, the right of it upon men, is to establish it in jama'ah, in the houses of Allah, in the masjid, as the Prophet ﷺ used to do. The Prophet ﷺ, he would never pray the fard prayer at home, except when he was sick ﷺ, which is one of the excuses of missing Salatul Jama'ah. But he would always make Salatul Jama'ah in the masjid. And even when he would be traveling ﷺ, he would make sure that he would pray it in Jama'ah. And he mentioned some of the ayat of the Quran that talks about the importance of the salah and the khushu' of it, and this is part of the characteristics of the believers, and the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. So we talked about that. And then after that, he says the next important matter after the salah, which is az-zakah, and of course fasting. But he says here, وَأَهَمُّ الْفَرَائِضِ بَعْدَ الصَّلَاةِ أَدَاءُ الزَّكَاةِ. The most important fara'id, the most important obligation after the salah is to establish the zakah. And the zakah is not upon everyone, it's upon those who would have what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bestowed upon them to give zakah. So that's why to learn the rulings of it and to be upon what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from us, and therefore either to have the knowledge of it or to ask the people of knowledge when it comes to the matters and the rules of the zakah. Okay, so when he mentioned about the zakah and the verse in the Quran, وَمَا أُمِرُوا إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ مُخْلِصِينَ لَهُ الدِّينَ وَيُقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةَ وَيُؤْتُوا الزَّكَاةَ. This is how it's explained in the Quran, that this is what is the difference between the believers and the disbelievers. The believers, they establish these pillars of Islam. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded the people to establish and to give the zakah. وَذَلِكَ دِينُ الْقَيِّمَةِ. This is the deen, the upright religion that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded the people to be upon. And as mentioned before, some of the early generations of Islam, they used to give the zakah in Sha'ban. Some of them, they would give the zakah in Sha'ban for many reasons, one of which is to get people sufficient. They have their sufficiency in Ramadan, so that the people would be more into the ibadah, not seeking means of provision, meaning the poor people, so that would help them to establish the acts of ibadat in Ramadan. And for other reasons, one of which is it's the month, meaning the month of Sha'ban, where the deeds are presented to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But of course, some people, the time of the zakah is not a choice, because it has to be given once the year or the Hijri year passes, once a person reached the nisab, and we talked about the ahkam of the zakah. But a person can give it early and change the time that he wants to give the zakah on. So if a person's zakah is used to give it, for example, in Dhul Hijjah, he can give it now and change the year, and he would still, or he can keep it still in Dhul Hijjah and give some of it earlier with the intention of the zakah, because you have to give zakah with the intention of giving zakah. You cannot just write it off. You cannot just give charity and then later on to say, well, this can be counted as zakah. No. while you're giving it. The intention when you give the money, it has to be from the zakah money. You give it before its time, that's fine. So you can give a portion of it, or you can give something. And then when the time that you're supposed to give the zakah, you can see how much you paid for zakah, and if there's anything left, you give it then. And also Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَأَقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةَ وَآتُوا الزَّكَاةَ. So it's a very obvious one. It's consensus among the ulama. It's one of the pillars of Islam. And لَعَلَّكُمْ تُرْحَمُونَ, so that you can attain the rahmah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He says, وَقَدْ دَلَّ كِتَابُ اللَّهِ الْعَظِيمُ وَسُنَّةُ رَسُولِهِ الْكَرِيمِ عَلَى أَنَّ مَنْ لَمْ يُؤَدِّ زَكَاةَ مَالِهِ يُعَذَّبُ بِهِ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ. It's clearly stated in the Quran and in the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ that whoever does not give his zakah of his wealth, he will be punished with it in the Day of Judgment. Punished with his wealth. As the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ talks about this. In Yawm al-Qiyamah, even before people enter the hellfire. This is in Arasat Yawm al-Qiyamah, in the place where Yawm al-Qiyamah and the Day of Judgment is established. If it's gold and silver, it will be heated, plated from the fire, and it will be on their backs. If it's an animal, then the animals will be made, and there will be a wide area for them to run over that person back and forth. In a day, its length is 50,000 years, as the Prophet ﷺ said. All of that is because he did not give the right of the poor from his wealth, which is nothing significant whatsoever, according to the rules of the zakah. And then said after that, وَأَهَمُّ الْأُمُورِ بَعْدَ الصَّلَاةِ وَالزَّكَاةِ صِيَامُ رَمَضَانِ. The most important things after Salah and Zakah is fasting the month of Ramadan, وهو أحد أركان الإسلام الخمسة المذكورة في قول النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم بني الإسلام على خمس. One of the 5 pillars of Islam that the Prophet ﷺ said in this famous hadith of Islam is built upon 5 pillars, and one of which is fasting the month of Ramadan. And some of these narrations you would find the order is different. Sometimes as Siyam comes before Hajj, and sometimes Hajj comes before Siyam. The order is, it's all pillars anyway, right? So therefore, it's to be observed the way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded us. And that's why he says, وَيَجِبُ عَلى الْمُسْلِمِ أَنْ يَصُونَ صِيَامًا. So this is a pillar of Islam. And as when we look into the pillars of Islam, the first pillar of Islam, which is the Shahadatain, a person has to live with it all of his life till he dies. So it has to be established constantly with every breath that a person takes, which is the belief that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the only one worthy of worship, and the one to be followed is the Prophet ﷺ, and believing in him and so on. Matters of belief, the Tawheed. And then the Salah is established on a daily basis 5 times a day. So at the end of one's life, then the establishment of this pillar of Islam, which is the Salah, the majmu' or the entire days when a person was mukallaf, the day that he was reached the age of puberty till he died, all of that 5 times a day, the salah, he will be asked about this. This is all one pillar of Islam with every salah. And of course, it's the most rewardable act. And you have the zakah, whatever years that he was supposed to give zakah, this is a pillar of Islam, he will be asked about it. And that's to be established even after a person dies. If he died and he had still zakah money that was not given, he has to include it in his will, or the inheritor will give it on his behalf. And you have the fasting the month of Ramadan, it's month every year, from the age of puberty also till he dies. And that's why those who missed some days, like women in their menses and things like this is debt that they have to fulfill, and to know the rulings and to learn it, and whether it's to give fidya or to fast, or those who are not able to fast. So the ahkam is mandatory. And as we said again, the principle, if there's something wajib, something fard upon the person, so before it happens, it's fard to learn it, so that the person know how to fulfill it in the right way. And you have Hajj once in lifetime for a few days. So here, يجب على المسلم. It's obligatory upon the Muslim أن يصون صيامه. يصون, الصيانة is when someone guards something, when someone makes sure that he perfected it and he maintain it. And actually the word is used nowadays for maintenance. You know, when you have, they call it عقد الصيانة, the contract of maintenance. You make a deal with someone to maintain, to give maintenance of your air conditioning, or they call it siyana. So a sawn here, a siyana is to keep on guarding one's actions, and yasuna siyamahu wa qiyamahu, to protect, to maintain to guard one's fasting and one's qiyam in Ramadan عما حرم الله عليه, from what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forbade on him من الأقوال والأعمال, from speech and actions. لأن المقصود بالصيام, so this is obligatory upon a person, that if you were helped by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to establish a ibadah, that you guard it. It's not that you just did the ibadah and that's it. No, this has to be guarded by making sure that it does not get polluted with sins. Because it's hasanat wa sayyat. A person building and destroying, doesn't make sense. So you build these good deeds, don't destroy it with the bad deeds. So, and that's why in al-hasanat yudhibun as-sayyat, the good deeds pushes away the bad deeds. In the salah tanha an al-fahsha'i wal-munkar, the salah forbids the person from the fahsha and the munkar and the evil sins. So one of the aspects of staying away from sins is to preserve one's dhakhira, one's ammunition, one's capital, whatever you want to call it. This is what we return to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with. Not your body, not your nothing but the actions. We are nothing but actions. And speech is part of the actions, physical actions, financial actions. So to preserve it, so that the person doesn't ruin it. Because he says لأن المقصود بالصيام هو طاعة الله سبحانه وتعالى. The objective of the Siyam is to be obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala وتعظيم حرماته, and to exalt the limits and what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forbade. And we see that clearly when a person is fasting, as we all know that, and we reflect upon this, and we're always reminded of it, that what is permissible halal in other than the days of Ramadan, you would not dare even to take a sip of water 1 minute before the sunset. This is a major, major sin. Something if a person does it intentionally. People are waiting and sometimes they fall into some form of a ghulu, sometimes which we're supposed not to have any ghulu. If the sun sets, then you break your fast. There's no such a thing as wait for 10 minutes, 5 minutes to make sure. There's something called either ghurub shams, or did the sun set or it didn't set. So the entire disk of the sun, if it disappears, then the person has to break his fast, and it's from the sunnah to do it right away. So to show that a person is making ta'zim, is exalting the commands of Allah, and that becomes an evidence for or against the person. Where are we then when it comes to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forbade? It's forbidden sins, major sins, minor sins. Why we're not dealing with it the same way? That we would make sure that we would guard our fasting. So that's why the fasting, if it's done in the right way, leads to the taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So ta'zimu hurumati, to exalt the hurumat of the month of Ramadan, ay sha'airu, the things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala established for us in Ramadan, that He forbade people from observing certain things which is halal for them during the night of Ramadan or other than Ramadan. So the advice here is to stay away from sins and to constantly repent to Allah. And he says وجهاد النفس على مخالفة هواها في طاعة مولاه. جهاد النفس, to struggle, to make jihad against oneself, to disobey one's desires that would make the person not obedient to Allah. So this is what al-jihad is, that you are doing jihad against something, against an enemy. So the nafs can be one's enemy, and we talked about that we deal with ourselves as if it's something separate entity, especially when it trying to take you away to the hellfire. So, and some even of the Sahaba or the early generations of Islam will speak to themselves. Ya nafsu ghurri ghayri, oh my nafs, deceive someone else. You're not going to deceive me. Right? So you don't have to say it like this, but this is part of that struggle. Or you want to be lazy, you don't want to go for the salah, no, that's not going to happen. By the will of Allah, I'm going to the salah. Right? This is like this. So the same thing, to make jihadun nafs, to oppose one's desire في طاعة الله, في طاعة مولاها, not to oppose the desire for the sake of opposing it, as some extremists would do, but it's rather in the obedience of Allah, according to the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, because this is how you wean yourself. So some people, they spend their entire life without weaning. A child takes 2 years and he's weaned. It's a difficult experience for the child when he's been weaned, because now he has to stay away from being breastfed to eat normal food. It's a difficult time for the mother and for the child, but he has to go through it, and then he gets over it, and he would never want to go back to that state anymore. Right? So the same thing when it comes to weaning oneself against what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forbade. It's always a period of time, but it requires, jihadun nafs and struggling with oneself. So it's a great opportunity. When someone says, I have sins, I'm not able to get rid of it, this and that, well, fast the month of Ramadan. If a person, he does not wait till Ramadan comes, but now it's the opportunity because it's fard. So you cannot say, I'm not going to fast. So then to use the month of Ramadan, since it's fard anyway, then why not use it in the most perfect way? And this is a meaning that many people, they don't pay attention to. So he says, وَتَعْوِيدُهَا الصَّبْرَ عَمَّ حَرَّمَ اللَّهِ. And to get oneself used to have the sabr, the patience, away from what Allah forbade. This 1 month of Ramadan is sufficient because this is what Allah decreed. So that means it's sufficient for a person to change his entire life. It's sufficient for a person to be among the muttaqeen in 30 days or 29 days, if it's done in the right way. So who would ever refuse to take that opportunity? 30 days or 29 days with tough days and nights? Yes, sure. And was it this morning that we said, as Tafsir Imam Sa'di, ليس من شرط الأمر أن يهون على العبد. It is not one of the conditions of a command of Allah that it's easy for you. It doesn't have to be easy. But again, some people, they take the religion as like this. If it's easy, what a beautiful religion is. Look at how easy the religion and the mercy of Allah and things like this. If it's something difficult, they would, of course, they would not say anything different than that, but they would try to find a way out, which is not for the believers. They should submit themselves to Allah. Yes, it's difficult in a sense that it's against one's desire. This is not difficulty. This is against one's desire. But then, after some time, it becomes the norm of the person, and life is tested. So, وَتَعْوِيدُهَا الصَّبْرِ. So, ta'weed is, that means you make yourself get used to as-sabr. There's a point here. We think that sabr is just a stage, and then it changes to something else. Right? You have patience, 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 and then it becomes easy. No, we need to get ourselves used to have sabr. We need to make sure that sabr is part of our life. That yes, some things you change from having so much sabr to attain it till it becomes your norm. When you first want to make salah, it's difficult. It's difficult every one day after the other till it becomes your norm. And some other things like that. But the act of ibadah that it's called as-sabr is a ibadah by itself. If we follow the deen of Allah. So to get used to have sabr. Therefore, that means a person has to be upon sabr till he dies. It's not like one of the great ulama, he does not have sabr anymore because he worked on himself earlier. No, it doesn't work that way. The sabr has to be always done. So, تعويدها الصبر عما حرم الله. To always get oneself used to as-sabr. And in 30 days, by the mercy of Allah, by the will of Allah, is sufficient for a person to get used to as-sabr. To make it patient upon what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves, and to make it patient to be away from what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hates and forbade. And to know oneself is, no one would know himself better than what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed to the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam about the human beings. So, i'tiyad al-khayr, the abd, the slave of Allah, if he is not forced, but if someone put you on in a place, like someone, say for example, addicted, I'm sorry that I'm taking too much time here, but say for example, someone is having an issue with addiction. What do they do to that person? He doesn't have a choice anymore. He's going to continue. So they force him, they take him and they put him in a place for rehabilitation or whatever they call it. And this is basically what it does to him. It's supposed to be, after a period of time, he's free from this addiction. So the same thing with matters of ibadah. You are being dragged, if you are given life to the month of Ramadan, you are being dragged to change yourself. You don't feel like changing yourself? Here you go. It's fard upon you to fast the month. It's fard upon you to be patient for 30 days. So no excuse afterwards. Right? So this is when he says وَتَعْوِيدُهَا الصَّبْرَ عَمَّ حَرَّمَ اللَّهِ. This is from the mercy of Allah. That, as he says in the Sharh, لأن العبد إذا حمل على الخير اعتاده. If the person is carried to be upon al-khair or goodness, he'll get used to it. And this is the entire tarbiyah is upon this. Upbringing of our children, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive us, is about this. This is your child. You're the one that make decision for your child. Get him used to al-khair. He cries and things like that. Get him used to the khair. If he gets used to the khair, then he become easy with it. But you say, no, let him just be exposed to the evil, you're ruining the child. So the same thing, our own nafs. So as there's a hadith which is reported by Imam Majah in his Sunan and Isnadu Hasan, as Sheikh al-Usaymi Hafidahullah, he says, the hadith says, al-khayru aada. Al-khayru aada, which is two words. Al-khayr, goodness is what? Aada. Aada is a habit. So I don't know where can a person find a solution to all problems in very simple terms like this, right? This is, if you want to be upon al-khair, just a period of time, make it your norm. And 30 days of Ramadan can change the norms. And that's why in Ramadan, one of the aspects of Ramadan is that the adat wal ma'lufat changes. The norm changes. Your norm changes. So that your norm becomes something else. You change your norms to be the norms that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala love. So, and that's why you disturb the entire norms that a person would have. Eating and drinking, no food and drinking for in the days, for 30 days. And the Qiyam and things like this. So that afterwards it's supposed to be, then you make istiqamah upon what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala obligated upon us and to stay away from what is haram. So al-khayru aada. And the person, when he do good, what happens? انشرحت نفسه له. Your nafs will have that, ألم نشرح لك صدرك, will have that spaciousness and it becomes more stronger upon it. So then he would be able to be steadfast upon it, like the norms, like the things that a person would do on a daily basis. So this is the maqsood, this is the objective of fasting. وليس المقصود مجرد ترك الطعام والشراب وسائر المفترات. The maqsood, which is the objective of the fasting, is not just to leave food and drink and the rest of what breaks the fast. This is, yes, this is mandatory. And as we said, this is, you don't get it, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is dragging you, if it's correct to say, I don't want to say the word this, but you are being changing these things by fulfilling the commands of Allah. So yes, fasting, the day is valid if you leave the muftarat of what breaks the fast. And if the person does it like this is the way to achieve the taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. So that maybe the fasting will give you the taqwa. So لَعَلَّكُمْ, this is the reason for it. This is the objective of it. And he mentioned two hadith, الصيام جنة. الصيام جنة. Two words of the hadith is الصيام جنة. الصيام is جنة with the dhamma on the jim, not jannah, even though they kind of share the same meaning. Al-Jannah is what? Paradise. But why is it Jannah? Because it's garden. Garden because it's concealed. No one can see the inside because of the trees. So As-Siyamu Junnah is a shield. So As-Siyamu Junnah because it's a shield that protects the person from the harm and the haram and things like this. So As-Siyamu Junnah. And the hadith, فإذا كان يوم صوم أحدكم فلا يرفث ولا يصخب فإن سبه أحد أو قاتله فليقل إني صائم. So if it's the day of you're fasting, فلا يرفث ولا يصخب. الرفث is the things that has to do with the intimate relations between the husband and wife. ولا يصخب, and not to have a loud voice and disputes and things like this. فإن سبه أحد أو قاتله. If someone reviles him or try to fight with him, فليقل, let him say إني صائم. Some of the narrations to say it twice or so. إني صائم, I am fasting. So this is the hadith. And then the hadith, من لم يدع قول الزور والعمل به فليس لله حاجة أن يدع طعامه وشرابه. Which means that whoever does not leave and abandons the قول الزور or شهادة الزور. قول الزور is the false speech. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in no need for him to stay away from his food and drink. So first of all, as-siyamu junnah. So junnah means shield, protection. So this is basically what al-junnah is, the thing that protects you. So fasting has this means of protection because it prevents the person from following his desires, and protects the person from the hellfire. So whatever leads to the hellfire and protects the person from the hellfire. So حجبت النار بالشهوات. The hellfire is covered with the desires, the sinful desires. So the Siyam is a shield from the shahawat that would make the person enter the hellfire. So it's both. So فإذا كان يوم صوم أحدكم فلا يرفث ولا يسخط. So الرفث, as we said, also it refers to الفحش في القول, the bad talk, when people say bad and very vulgar things. And a sakhab is disputing with someone, arguing and disputing and things like this. So some people, they know this in Hajj. فلا رفث ولا فسوق ولا جدال في الحج. And they go for Hajj in Ihram. Once a person started to argue, they would remind them, be careful, you are in Ihram. And they would ask, does that break my Ihram because I argued with the taxi driver or with this and that? It doesn't break the Ihram, but it takes away from the rewards. The same thing with a person fasting. It takes away from the reward of fasting. When a person would argues and raises voice and disputes and things like this. So it says, فَإِنْ سَابَّهُ أَحَدٌ أَوْ قَاتَلَهُ فَلْيَقُلْ إِنِّي صَائِمٌ. If someone reviles him or fights with him, then he should say, إِنِّي صَائِمٌ. And this is to be said like that. To say, إِنِّي صَائِمٌ. And at least if the other one does not understand Arabic, you can say it in whatever it means. So this is in fard, agreed upon, and also in nafl, according to the correct opinion, to say the same thing. And it's not showing off that you're fasting, mashallah. So what are you trying to make a statement here? No, it's not about showing off. That means I'm not in that mood, if it's correct to say. I'm not like in this level of getting myself down into the level in which I have to face a dispute and things like this. I'm busy with something else. So, and this is, the Prophet ﷺ said that. So you say it, if that happens, and you push away showing off. It's not about, and even you push away from your heart, that the other person would think that you're fasting, mashallah, that you're showing off. Let them think that way, it doesn't matter. Even if it's nafl fasting. But some people, they say inni sa'im as if they are just pushing it or throwing it to someone's face with anger. Inni sa'im, like, leave me alone, and they want to punch them in the face while saying inni sa'im. No, you don't say it like that. But rather to be at ease and to control oneself. So, and then the other hadith, ما لم يدع قول الزور, whoever doesn't stay away from قول الزور, قول الباطل, falsehood and acting upon it. So, الزور is what? Shahadat al-zur is when someone goes for a false testimony, right? So he would witness for something that didn't happen in front of the judge, which is one of the destructive sins. So qawl al-zur is that when it basically refers to the batil or the falsehood that has no reality to it. It does not exist. And that's why al-batil is only in the imaginations of people. They make up stuff. They make up their own things. Whether it's gods that they worship besides Allah, they're not gods. They cannot help themselves. So it's all false. False, that means it has no reality to it. And the same thing with sins in general, or the speech of falsehood. So it is of no importance whatsoever. And the hadith is wal-jahl. Whoever does not leave al-jahl, ignorance. And ignorance in that context means to do the sins and to stay away from the ta'at or the acts of obedience to Allah. They're both jahl. So jahl is, ignorance is when a person commits sins, and a jahl also when a person leaves something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded us to be upon. And as the statement by the early generations of Islam, كل من عصى الله فهو جاهل. Everyone that commits a sin, everyone that disobeys Allah, he is jahl. He is ignorant. It's not with ilm only. Al-jahl is not what opposite of ilm or knowledge or information. Al-jahl is when someone disobeys Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فعلم بهذه النصوص, then from these nusus, from these texts and these revelations, وغيرها أن الواجب على الصائم, that it's obligatory upon the صائم, the fasting person, الحذر من كل ما حرم الله عليه, to be warned from anything that Allah forbade, والمحافظة على كل ما أوجب الله عليه, and to guard everything that Allah obligated upon him. وبذلك يرجى له المغفرة. That's how the person would seek the maghfirah, the forgiveness of the sins, والعتق من النار, and to be freed from the fire, وقبول الصيام والقيام, and for the siyam and the qiyam to be accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. all of that is based on fulfilling these commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala the way it ought to be. Then after that, he will talk about the umur قد تخفى على بعض الناس, some of the matters that some people might not be aware of it. It's hidden because it requires extra matters of knowledge to know with regards to some of the things in Ramadan. So we'll do that inshallah ta'ala, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will, next time. We'll take the hadith, and then if you have any questions, inshallah, we can go through them. The hadith of today from the 50 hadith of Imam Rajab, the 40 hadith of Imam Nawawi, and the 10 that completes the 50. The last hadith that we took, I should have this already. Okay, hadith number 133. Hadith 133, this is extremely easy. I think we'll have so many people this time with the test of memorization. So, hadith number 133. Everybody there? عن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه أن رجلا قال للنبي صلى الله عليه وسلم أوصني قال لا تغضب فردد مرارا قال لا تغضب رواه البخاري. So this hadith, a man, he said to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Awsini. Awsini means give me wasiyya. Al-wasiyya, whether people say it advice or like the will, what's the significance of the word of al-wasiyya? وَلَقَدْ وَصَّيْنَا الَّذِينَ أُوتُوا الْكِتَابَ مِنْ قَبْلِكُمْ وَإِيَّاكُمْ أَنِ اتَّقُوا اللَّهَ. It's the strongest means of passing on some nasiha or advice to someone, because it's always comes into the meaning of a farewell thing, that you would say something to someone that you might not see him again. So what would you say to him? You know, when you have someone that you see all the time and you see that he's having something wrong, you make a plan. Inshallah, today I'll remind him of this. Maybe you take him step by step, invite him for dinner, and maybe just have a strong relationship and like this. But someone that you might only see him one time, right? So you have to be different. And this is where the wasiyah comes in place. Something that you don't need much afterwards of something to follow up with it. So it's an important matter when it comes into the subject of al-wasiyah. So the man said to the Prophet ﷺ, Awsini, give me a wasiyah. The Prophet ﷺ said to him only one word, لا تغضب. لا تغضب, which means don't be angry, don't get angry. Al-ghadab is the anger. فردد مرارا, he repeated it miraran many times. Whether it's, as some of the narration says, that he asked again. He thought that this is not enough, he wants more. So he asked again, so the Prophet ﷺ told him لا تغضب, and he kept on saying لا تغضب. قال لا تغضب, do not get angry. And this hadith is always mentioned by the ulama as an example of sometimes the Prophet ﷺ would give different wasiyas to different people, because he knows ﷺ that what fits that person the best. As if he knew that maybe that person has an issue with al-ghadab. He has an issue with getting angry, and this affecting him. So he is in need of that wasiyah more than anything else. And also it's in general, since this is for the entire ummah, so everybody is supposed to observe this wasiyah. Whether a person has it or he has less of it, and others they have more of it. And as some of the ulama, they mentioned that 1/4 of the deen of Islam is upon this hadith. لا تغضب. Why? Because the a'mal is either khair or shar, either good or evil. And the shar or the evil comes as a result of what? Desire or ghadab. Right? As you know, you can classify things. Ulama, they have the different classification of things, right? So when you look at the evil, either some would put it in under two categories: a shahwa, desire, And of course, the shubuhat and things like this, doubts. But ash-shahwa, when you come to the shahawat, the sins itself, either desires or comes as a result of anger. You get angry, so you would backbite. You get angry, you hit someone. You do dhulm on someone, things like this. So that's why when you see 1/4 of Islam is in this hadith, if a person protects himself of how he acts when he's angry, this is something that can protect 1/4 of his deen, if it's correct to say. So, and that's why, because it's the hadith, it does not say never ever get angry, because this is against human beings. If a person does not get angry, as Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah said, he is حمار. الذي لا يغضب فهو حمار. الحمار is the donkey, the one that does not get angry. So it's against being a human being that you have to get angry, but you have to direct it to be first for the sake of Allah. And if it's for your own self, then you have to suppress it, or you have to act according to the deen. You are not let to act based on your anger. So this is what is meant by لا تغضب. It's not that it means never get yourself angry, but it means do not act upon al-ghadab, or do not act according to your anger, and you have to suppress it. So basically, stay away from the asbab, the means that would get you angry, and the means that what comes after as a result of this. And whether it's in relationships and in matters, subhanAllah, there is all kinds of things that a person would fall into sins as a result of that. Especially for those who are closer to the person, he has to be careful. How many talaq has been said, when a person is angry, and then they regret afterwards. I was so angry, I was this and that. And anger does not stop the talaq to be valid. If someone is angry and he says the word of talaq to his wife, she is divorced. The talaq that is not to be established with anger is the anger that makes a person insane. He reaches a state where he does not, as the ulama they say, he does not know the day from the night, he does not know what he's saying. And after he wakes up from this insanity that he's in, he says, what did I say? What did I just say? Which is an extreme level of anger. Not that a person is angry, but say, so a person is responsible for his action if he's angry. So not every anger a person, I was angry, please forgive me. There's no such a thing. You're angry, you need to control your anger. Yes, we're pardoning, it's something else. A person should pardon others, especially if they're angry, and to overlook. But a person has to, and there's etiquettes to be observed. If a person is standing, is to sit down. If he's sitting down, to lay down, as the Prophet ﷺ said, to make wudu, things like this. So we'll stop there, even there's so many evidences with regards to that. But the hadith, it's just لا تغضب فردد مرارا قال لا تغضب. بارك الله فيكم وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على محمد وصحبه وسلم. سبحانك اللهم ربنا وبحمدك اشهد ان لا اله الا انت استغفرك واتوب اليك.